The night my stepfather showed up at my building with 2 rolling suitcases and a sense of entitlement I hadn't seen in 4 years. I was sitting at my kitchen island in a cashmere sweater, finishing a glass of Okanagan Red, and reviewing contracts for a project in North Vancouver. The concierge called up as he always does, because that's how things work in a building, where you actually pay for security, and said there were 2 people in the lobby claiming to be my family. I told him to give me 5 minutes. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I set my wine down carefully on the white quartz counter, walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the water, and I thought, of course this is how it happens. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed architect in British Columbia, and I own a 2-bedroom condo on the 14th floor of a building in Vancouver's Coal Harbour neighborhood that I bought 3 years ago with money I earned entirely by myself. I mention this not to brag, but because it matters. It matters because my mother and my stepfather spent the better part of a decade making it very clear to me that I would amount to nothing without them, and then spent the last 4 years pretending I didn't exist at all. 4 years. Not a birthday call, not a text at Christmas, not a single response to the 2 emails I sent in the first year after I left, when I was still naive enough to think the silence was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I'll back up, because you need to understand what kind of people we're talking about. My mother remarried when I was 11. My stepfather, I'll call him Dennis, because that's his name and I'm done protecting it, moved into our house in Burnaby with his son from his first marriage, a boy named Kyle, who was 2 years younger than me, and who my mother decided, within approximately 6 months, was the child she'd always wanted. I watched it happen in real time, the way her face changed when she looked at him, versus when she looked at me. The way Dennis would steer conversations at dinner toward Kyle's hockey stats and then go quiet when I mentioned anything about my own life. The way my mother started saying things like, "We need to think about what's best for this family," in a tone that made it clear I wasn't quite included in that category. I wasn't abused. I want to be precise about that. I was fed and housed and sent to school. But there is a particular kind of erasure that happens slowly, over years, where you are not hated but simply deprioritized until you become invisible. And that is what happened to me in that house. By the time I was 17, I had learned to be very small and very quiet and very useful, because those were the conditions under which I was tolerated. My grandmother, my mother's mother, not Dennis's family, saw what was happening. She would call me separately, take me for lunch, ask me real questions about my life. When she passed away during my 2nd year at UBC, she left me $40,000 in her will. It was in a separate account, designated clearly for me, and she had told me about it personally before she died. She said, "This is yours, Claire. Don't let anyone touch it. I don't need to tell you what happened to it." By the time my mother mentioned the account to me, 8 months after my grandmother's funeral, the money had been moved. Dennis had a business situation, she explained, a short-term cash flow problem. Kyle needed a car for his new job. The furnace in the house had to be replaced. She said it the way people say things they've already decided aren't up for discussion, not as a confession, as an accounting. She told me they'd pay it back. She used the phrase family investment. I was 22 years old, sitting in my childhood kitchen, and I remember the exact feeling, not rage, not even grief, but something colder. A door closing very quietly inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I said okay, stood up, went to my room and started packing. Within 3 weeks I was in a sublet in East Vancouver sharing a bathroom with 2 strangers, working 30 hours a week at a firm downtown, while finishing my degree, eating a lot of rice and frozen vegetables, and telling absolutely no one in my family where I was. That was the last real conversation I had with my mother for 2 years. After that there were a few attempts her calling from numbers I didn't recognize. A card at Christmas the first year that I didn't open until March, and then nothing. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. I could have been dead for all they knew or, apparently, cared. Here is what they didn't know. I was not dead. I was working. I passed my licensing exams at 25. I got hired at a firm I respected. I saved aggressively, the way you do when you grow up understanding that no one is coming to catch you. I bought the condo at 28, a decision that scared me completely, and that I made anyway, because I had run the numbers a dozen times and I trusted my own numbers. I built a client list. I got promoted. I started taking on independent contracts. By 30, I was making more than Dennis had ever made in his best year. A fact I knew, because my mother used to announce his salary at the dinner table like it was a family achievement. I had not told any of them any of this. We had no contact. That was my choice, and it was the right one. So when the concierge called and said 2 people with luggage were claiming to be my family, I knew immediately what had happened, not the specific details, but the shape of it. Something had gone wrong in their lives, and they had somehow found me, and they were here because they needed something. I told the concierge I'd come down. I want to explain why I didn't just say turn them away and hang up. I've thought about this since, because plenty of people, including, I suspect, some of you watching this, would have done exactly that. And you would not be wrong. But I had spent 4 years building something solid, and I needed this to end completely. Not temporarily. Not in a way that left a door open for them to try again in 6 months through a different channel. I needed it finished. And to finish it properly, I needed to understand exactly what they wanted, and I needed them to say it out loud, on record, in a place where I controlled every variable. My building has very good security cameras in the lobby. I knew that before I got in the elevator. My mother looked older. That was the first thing I noticed, the way grief or stress, or just the arithmetic of bad decisions, ages a person faster than time alone should. Dennis looked the same, which is to say he looked like a man who had never once questioned whether he deserved what he had. He was wearing a fleece vest. He had the kind of expression people wear when they're trying to look like they're not asking for a favor while absolutely asking for a favor. My mother said my name. Just my name, like that was a sentence. I said, "Why don't you come up?" It wasn't a question. In the elevator, nobody spoke. I watched Dennis take in the building, the marble floors, the brushed nickel fixtures, the small engraved plaque near the call buttons that showed the building management company's name. I watched him recalibrating in real time, and I felt nothing in particular about it. In my condo, I offered them water. My mother sat on my couch and looked around the room with an expression I couldn't entirely read, somewhere between pride and resentment, which I thought was about right. Dennis remained standing, which people do when they want to feel like they have options. I sat down across from them, crossed my legs, and waited. Dennis spoke first. He said they'd had a difficult couple of years. He said the market had been rough. He had been in real estate investment in a minor way, flipping properties in the Fraser Valley, and several deals had gone badly. He said the word "unfortunately" 3 times in 4 sentences. He said they had needed to refinance the house in Burnaby, and that the terms had become unmanageable. I said, "How much?" He told me. It was not a small number. The kind of number that, if you don't have it liquid, reorganizes your life. My mother looked at her hands. Dennis said they weren't asking for a gift. He was very clear about that, very firm, the way men are firm about distinctions that don't actually hold up. He said it would be a loan. He said Kyle was getting back on his feet. There had been some trouble, some legal matter he described vaguely, some period of unemployment, and that once things stabilized, they would pay me back. He used the phrase "pay it back" 3 times. He had used it before, in a different kitchen, about a different sum of money, and I noticed that my mother still did not look up. I let him finish. Then I said, "I need to tell you something, Dennis." I said it quietly. I've learned that quiet is more unsettling than volume. I said, "I'm not going to give you money." His face went through several things quickly. I said, "I'm also not going to lend you money, because we both know what that means." My mother said my name again, differently this time. I said, "But I do want to talk about the house." Dennis said he didn't understand what I meant. I said, "Your mortgage, the Burnaby house. I want to talk about what's happening with it." He said that was a private matter, and he didn't see what it had to do with me. And I said, "It has quite a bit to do with me, actually, because I'm your lender." The room was very quiet. I should explain. 6 months earlier, I had been having coffee with a colleague who does a lot of work in real estate law, and she had mentioned in passing that a property in Burnaby had gone to a private mortgage company after the original lender had called the loan. She mentioned the address because she knew I'd grown up in that area and thought I might know the street. I knew the address. I knew it exactly. I won't walk through every step of what happened after that coffee, because some of it is technical and some of it is private, but the short version is, I spent 2 months working with a lawyer and a mortgage broker, and by the time my mother and Dennis rang my intercom, I had purchased the outstanding mortgage note on their house from the private lender who held it. It was a distressed debt. The price I paid was significantly less than the face value of the loan. It was completely legal. My lawyer had reviewed every detail 4 times. They were 4 months behind on payments, under the terms of the mortgage, that put them in default. I was their lender. I watched Dennis's face as he understood what I had just said. He started talking fast, the way people talk when they're trying to find the angle, the escape route, the thing they can say that will change the shape of the room. He said I couldn't do that. He said it wasn't ethical. He said the word family twice, and I noticed, not for the first time, that people use that word most loudly when they mean you owe me. I said, "I didn't do anything illegal. I can show you the documentation if you'd like." My mother said, "Claire, please." I looked at her, and I want to be honest about this moment, because I think it matters. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, mostly. I felt the particular exhaustion of being someone who had to build every single thing herself because the people who were supposed to help decided not to. I thought about my grandmother's voice on the phone, calling me separately, asking real questions. I thought about $40,000 that had been mine, and then wasn't. I said, Mom, they took your mother's money. Your mother left that money for me and they used it. You let them. She didn't say anything. I said, I've been gone 4 years. Not a call, not a message, nothing. And the first time I hear from you, it's because you need money. Dennis said they'd had a lot going on. I said, I know. That's why I'm not here to punish anyone. I meant it. I'm here to close something. Properly. I slid a folder across the coffee table. My lawyer had prepared it. It contained 2 things. A formal repayment schedule for the outstanding mortgage, structured over 10 years with a fixed interest rate that was genuinely lower than what the private lender had been charging them, and a separate document, a legal release, stating that all financial claims between us, including the matter of my grandmother's estate, were settled in full upon completion of the repayment. I said, you pay the mortgage on schedule, and at the end of 10 years the house is yours clear. I won't contact you outside of scheduled payment notices. You don't contact me outside of payment matters. When the last payment is made, we're done. Clean. Dennis said, and if we don't sign? I said, then I pursue the default through proper channels. That process takes time, and it's expensive, and the outcome for the house is probably not what you want. He picked up the document. He read it. I watched him read it. The way you watch a person doing arithmetic they don't want to do but can see the answer to anyway. My mother said, very quietly, where did you get the money for this? I said, I earned it. She said, we didn't know you were doing this well. I said, you didn't ask. That was the only moment I felt something close to what I'd maybe call grief, not for the current situation, but for the years in that house in Burnaby when I was small and quiet and useful, and she had not asked then either. Not really, not in the way that mattered. Dennis signed first, which surprised me slightly. I think he was a practical man in the end, and he could see the numbers. My mother signed second. Her hand was shaking a little. I walked them to the elevator. Dennis didn't say anything. My mother paused at the door and looked at me, and I could see she wanted to say something large and complicated. And I understood that, and I also understood I didn't have space for it right now. Maybe not ever. Maybe someday. But not that night, in my hallway, at 31 years old. I said, travel safe. The elevator doors closed. I went back inside. I locked the door. I stood at my kitchen island for a moment, and then I picked up my glass of wine, which had reached exactly the right temperature by now, and I finished it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. Documents received. You okay? I typed back, yes, thank you. I looked out at the water. Vancouver at night is genuinely beautiful, the lights reflecting on the inlet, the North Shore mountains going dark against the sky. I had worked very hard to be able to look at this view from inside my own home, and I thought about that for a moment. About all the evenings I had spent in that East Vancouver sublet eating rice, and telling myself that the numbers would eventually add up. About the years of showing up early, and staying late, and saying yes to difficult projects, and learning how to read a contract the way my grandmother had taught me to read people carefully, completely, without assuming anything. The first payment arrived on the scheduled date, 90 days later. It came through a bank transfer, clean and punctual. It has come every month since. I don't know what Dennis and my mother tell people about their mortgage situation. I don't know what they say about me, or whether they say anything at all. I have made peace with not knowing. What I know is that my grandmother left me $40,000 and a set of values, and they took the $40,000, but they couldn't touch the values. And in the end, it turned out the values were worth considerably more. If you are someone who is building something quietly, by yourself, without a safety net, without people cheering you on at the dinner table, I want you to know that the numbers do add up. Not quickly, not without sacrifice, but they add up. Keep going. Trust your own math. And if anyone ever tries to tell you that your success belongs to the family that didn't help you build it, close the folder, slide it across the table, and let them read the terms.